which running back should be in or out of your lineup for week 10 of the fantasy season. We're going to go game by game and talk about every running back that might matter and tell you who we like and who we don't. Now, we got 4 teams on bye this week, and there's some big teams here. We're talking about the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Rams. Fortunately, there's still some running backs you don't have to worry about. These guys are must starts no matter what. Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, and Jonathan Taylor. Before we start with the Thursday night matchup of the Panthers and the Bears, don't forget that if you are new to Underdog, you can take advantage of the new customer special. That's Bryce Young just getting 1 yard in that game. If he goes over a yard and you pick the higher, you win that pick, combine it with any other pick, and you triple your money. You already double your money in your account just for signing up if you use promo code ENDGAME. That gets you a 100% deposit match all the way up to $500 for a limited time. If you haven't tried Underdog, it's the perfect time. All right, Chris, how about that Thursday night matchup? In Carolina, it still looks like it's Chuba Hubbard's backfield, but are you worried that he might lose his grip on the starting job?
I'm not worried about that. I'm just more worried about that he's on the Carolina Panthers and the Bears have been a better defense. But look, he's getting the bulk of the work here. Still significantly ahead of Miles Sanders. I mean, not a guy I feel great about that I feel like is a must start this week. But he's a guy with the bye weeks and everything. If you need him, you can start him.
Not quite the smash spot of last week. A road game, Chicago. Not as easy as you might think it would be. And, he's no Aaron Jones. But I think he's still in the RB2 range just because, again, so many quality teams on bye this week. You need a guy, Hubbard could fill in. Now, we did at least see some Miles Sanders in week 9. Is it enough to make him fantasy relevant?
No, you'd have to be very desperate. I mean, you're just hoping that he somehow gets more and more work this week. On the road against the Bears, I'm not starting Miles Sanders.
No, not at all. It's been disappointing this season. This whole offense has been disappointing. That's the thing. If you're going to take a chance on a running back who's not the starter, it should be a guy on a good offense, and he's offering neither right now. You can't start Miles Sanders. On the other hand, Chicago, well, it looks like Deontay Foreman is keeping a grip on the starting job for now. He got most of the work here, running in the lead, and hey, the Carolina Panthers' run defense is still one of the worst in the league. Does that make you interested in Foreman?
It would, except we may see Khalil Herbert this week. He was technically a full participant in practice. Now, granted, it's Thursday game. They don't do normal practicing, but he is eligible to be back this week. That could muddy things up, but it is a good matchup for Deontay Foreman, so I will put him in that if you need him, you can start him category.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say right now. It's going to be maybe all the way up to game time till we know what the situation is in that backfield. We'll say Rashawn Johnson's just a non-factor. It looks like he's running well behind here, so Foreman would be a strong start except for Herbert. So right now, I'd say a risky streamer at running back. And then if Khalil Herbert is active, is he a guy that you're interested in just because of the matchup?
Again, I think you have to be. I mean, it's always tough to trust a guy coming back from injury. And Deontay Foreman seems to have earned some bit of a role that he didn't have earlier in the year. So, again, only because of the matchup and because of all the teams on bye, I'll say if Herbert plays, you can start him, but certainly not a must start.
No, definitely risky. I mean, it's not like he was a sure thing even before the injury, right? Kind of a boom bust guy. Again, it's a great spot, but right now, just very risky, only if you really don't have anybody else. All right, then we have another game overseas in Germany. So in Frankfurt, we'll see the Colts taking on the Patriots. Well, it looks like Jonathan Taylor has taken over again his role there as lead back. So where does that leave Zach Moss?
On my bench. I can't do it. 7 touches last week. Germany, weird games. Patriots, they're not a fantastic defense, but it's probably going to be a low-scoring, ugly game. Not starting Zach Moss.
I mean, he was one of my biggest disappointments last week. Just when you thought he was running there neck and neck with JT, went the other way. I mean, this was bound to happen, right? Didn't smash in a smash spot. I'm not rolling him out in this game, so he's a hard pass. And then Ramondre Stevenson kind of looked like the Mondre of last season, put up his best game of the season. Do you feel like he's coming on?
Yeah, I wasn't really feeling him last week. He hit that huge run obviously, but he did look pretty good even outside of that. This is a much better matchup against the Colts. I think Ramondre Stevenson is a solid start this week.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the Patriots have to keep running him. They have to use him because there's nothing going in that passing game. Doing the smart thing, running the ball more. I wish Zeke would kind of just go away, but still, I feel like Ramondre is a solid RB2. All right, then we have the Browns taking on the Ravens, who look like one of the best teams, if not the best team in football these days. So let's talk about the Browns running attack. Jerome Ford. I mean, health isn't the issue. Maybe efficiency is at this point. Can you trust him in this matchup?
Yeah, it's a tough matchup. I'm not too worried about his efficiency. I mean, yeah, he wasn't very efficient last week, but he's still dealing with the ankle. We know ankles are something that, impact running backs for a little while. 20 carries, 5 catches. I mean, that's fantastic. This is not as good of a matchup as he had last week, so I can only put him in that start him if you need him category because he is catching passes and he could score.
Yeah, I feel like at least for one more week, we'll have a buy low window on Jerome Ford because I don't feel a big game here. The volume's encouraging. The matchup is not. So very risky kind of streamer for me. But again, not giving up on Jerome Ford long term. And then what about Kareem Hunt? I mean, he's still involved. He's scoring touchdowns. Is he higher up than Ford for you or kind of the same?
No, he's definitely below Jerome Ford. I mean, even with a touchdown, he scored less fantasy points than Jerome Ford last week. So, touchdown or bust for Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, pretty much, which is funny because we used to think of Hunt as kind of more a PPR play. Now he's more just like a goal line back, which is odd. So, yeah, agree. You can stream him, but again, just such a tough spot. And then when you say touchdown, you got to think Gus the Bust can't stop scoring. Is it going to stop this week against Cleveland?
I mean, it's got to stop at some point. This is a brutal matchup, but I mean, until it does, can you really sit him? Even in this tough matchup, I think you got to keep rolling with Gus.
I think so. I mean, obviously more value in standard leagues than PPR. Still not a pass catching back, but I mean, he's clearly the lead back here. He's clearly getting the goal line working. You know he does that well, so just kind of locked in as a solid RB2. And then there's Keaton Mitchell. All right, so people have been talking about Keaton Mitchell for a while now, and finally there was, I guess we have to call it the breakout game. He led the NFL in rushing in Week 9. So what does that mean for Keaton Mitchell in Week 10?
Who knows? I mean, you want to stash him, fine. I'm not ready to put him in my lineup. This is a brutal spot. You need him to rip off a long run, a long touchdown, which he can do, but this is not the matchup where I feel like it's going to happen. I'm sitting Keaton Mitchell if I have him on my bench.
I mean, look, I don't want to be the one to pour cold water all over somebody who looks like a hot prospect or whatever, but I think he's going to be a massive letdown this week. All of his yardage came after this game was well out of hand against Seattle. It was a blowout. It was a weird game. It was just ripping off runs against a defense that had kind of given up. So against the Browns, basically the best defense in the NFL, I'm not doing it. Texans going to take on the Bengals. Should be a very interesting matchup between those quarterbacks. But what about the running backs in Houston? Well, Damian Pierce missed last week. If he comes back, is there any interest in him?
Hard pass on Damian Pierce.
I mean, was he startable even before he was hurt? No. And then Devin Singletary got all the run last week, and it didn't matter. Would it matter if he was the only running back available this week?
Hard pass on Devin Singletary.
Houston, it's amazing how well they can pass the ball when they're completely incapable of running the ball. You just have to ignore all Texans running backs right now. And then there's Joe Mixon, kind of getting his feet under him mid-season. Is he going to continue with a strong play?
I definitely think he can. It's a good matchup for him. He could score again. Nothing to be scared of here. I think Joe Mixon this week is a solid start.
Yep, at home, Bengals are rolling. You know, he's not going to be the most explosive back anymore, but the volume is there. He's in a good situation. He's just kind of a solid set-and-forget RB2. The 49ers are going to play the Jaguars this week. Look, if you have either of those running backs, you are good. You don't need to sweat it. Saints going to take on the Vikings. Well, let's start with Alexander Mattison in Minnesota because he is it. Cam Akers done for the season, possibly career ender there, very sad. But Mattison now resumes his workhorse role. Does that make him startable?
Yeah, I think it's got to make him startable. It's not a great matchup, but he's going to get all the run here. he has a chance to score. So I think, again, Madison this week. I mean, I don't feel great about him, but he's startable.
Well, what I like with Madison is you saw last week involved as a receiver. Look, until Jefferson comes out, they're going to need him. He's going to get the run. It's not a great spot against the Saints defense. He is startable at least in this week. I feel like he could be at least a low-end RB2. Packers taking on the Steelers. Aaron Jones looking better, looking more like the old Aaron Jones. So does that mean that he goes back to being a solid start?
This week he does. This is a fantastic matchup. Had 20 carries last week, 6 targets, 4 catches, looked fully healthy. Steelers run defense, not good at all. One of the worst. I love Aaron Jones this week.
Well, I still can't feel great about the Green Bay offense in general, especially on the road against Pittsburgh. But if there's a guy I feel good about, it is Aaron Jones because, again, it has evolved as a receiver. He's looking better. So Aaron Jones, if you got him, pretty much you should be starting him. So where does that leave A.J. Dillon? We saw him take a little bit of a step back in terms of touches.
Yeah, now with Aaron Jones healthy, hard pass on A.J. Dillon.
Yep, gonna agree. There's really no reason to start him. Didn't really even take advantage while Aaron Jones was out, so can't start it now. And then can you start either of the Pittsburgh running backs? These guys just so up and down. Let's start with Najee Harris. It's a home game against the Packers.
I mean, he can always score, but that's it. Touchdown dependent, touchdown or bust. If you need him, sure, but that's it.
Yeah, the problem is this really has become a very strict timeshare, almost equal in terms of splitting touches. Steelers can only score so many points with this offense, so only start if you need. And then I kind of just feel the exact same way about Jaylen Warren. I mean, I guess he looks better sometimes than Najee, but it doesn't mean he's that much more productive. So I'm saying if you need him because of bye weeks or whatever, you can start him.
Yeah, same thing. If you need him, you can start him. It is actually a good matchup for the running game, but I mean, it's the Steelers running game. So if you need him, you can start him, but that's it.
All right, Titans playing the Bucs in Tampa. Derrick Henry, still his solid self. What about Tyjae Spears? How's he looking under this new offense with Will Levis at quarterback?
Not as good. Can't feel good about him. Cannot start him.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be too much longer before we really don't have to talk about Spears as anything more than a handcuff or just a deep stash, so not startable. Now Rachaad White, on the other hand, this is more what we expected when we drafted him early this season. Is he now locked into your fantasy lineups?
I think he has to be. This isn't a great matchup, but does it matter? I mean, he's doing his damage catching passes. I know he scored twice last week. I'm not banking on that again, but he's catching passes. They're finding ways to get him out in space. I think Rachaad White, once again, a solid start.
Yeah, especially in PPR leagues, you have to love the way he's involved. He basically is a workhorse here. Not as great a spot against the tough Tennessee run defense, but still, I mean, few guys getting as many opportunities as him, so I think a high-end RB2. Atlanta is going to take on Arizona in the desert. Here we go. Bijan Robinson clearly cannot be considered a no-doubt must-start. What do we do with him?
I mean, it's a great matchup against the Cardinals. I don't know. You got to hope Arthur Smith at some point starts giving him more run, giving him chances to score. He's a great talent. It's a great matchup. Not a no-doubt must-start anymore, but I think he's still a good start this week.
You know, as much as this whole situation defies logic, we still have to do what makes the most sense, and that's start the super talented running back in the great matchup. For the most part, unless you're really deep at running back, you kind of have to start Bijan Robinson. But what about Tyler Algier, who for some reason seems to at times still be the leading rusher for this team?
Well, he's never the leading rusher because he's terrible, but sometimes he does lead in carries. But just out of principle, I am never starting Tyler Algier. And anybody who does, you just hate fun. You just must hate fun.
I like taking the hard stance there. I mean, look, what is the upside here anyways? Just realistically, you hope he scores a touchdown, although we've seen him get stuffed at the goal line and then continue to get goal line. I can't keep going on this. Look, I'm not starting Tyler Algier. Now, maybe good news for Arizona. Besides already getting Kyler Murray back, we could see James Conner back. Does that mean you put him right back in your lineup?
I think you have to. I mean, he was very good before the injury. None of these running backs showed anything while he was out. Kyler Murray's going to be back. It's not a horrible matchup. I think if James Conner plays, he's a good start this week.
Yeah, got to remember, before that injury, He was one of the top fantasy running backs, getting all the touches. Nobody else there is even remotely a threat. So, yeah, if Connor's playing, I'm starting him. If Connor's not ready, I guess it's still Keontae Ingram. Is he a possibility?
No, hard pass on Keontae Ingram.
Yeah, big time pass. I don't really care who it is if it's not James Conner. I'm not starting any other Arizona running back. Then we got Lions at the Chargers. We should see David Montgomery back after his extended absence. Is he also a guy that you just resume as usual?
I think you have to. It's not a terrible matchup. We know he's got touchdown upside. He looked good before that injury. Dan Campbell still trusts him. He's a solid start this week.
Yeah, I'm going to view him exactly as I did before the injury. If I got David Montgomery, I'm starting him. And this Chargers run defense definitely not scaring me off. In fact, it makes me feel like Monty could have another big game. But then what about Jahmyr Gibbs? Had a huge game before the bye, but now Monty's back. This is going to be a tough call.
It will be a tough call, but I think he probably showed enough in those 2 games to gain some of Dan Campbell's trust, enough to have a role here, catching passes. So I think this week, with the teams on the bye and the running back situation here, he's at least startable.
Yeah, definitely startable. I'm not going to assume he's going to get significantly more touches than he did before Monty was out. So I still view him as risky, but with some upside based on the matchup. All right, now we got the Giants taking on the Cowboys. This might be a mismatch. At least the Giants do have a good running back you can still feel pretty good about. How good can you feel about Tony Pollard these days?
Well, you can't feel good about him these days, but you should feel very good about him this week. The Giants, one of the worst run defenses. We just saw Josh Jacobs run wild all over them. Tony Pollard had a great game in week 1 against them. I think, as scary as it might be, Tony Pollard is a very good start this week.
Now, despite the fact he's been really disappointing in terms of fantasy, especially because of where he was drafted, you have to realize he hasn't been terrible in real life. He's just been disappointing in fantasy, but the one thing that saved us from full-blown panic here is that he plays the Giants. Remember back in week 1 when these teams played, he got to 70 yards. I feel like he can even do better than that because of the state of the Giants. With a backup to the backup quarterback, this offense will not be controlling the ball. So you pretty much should be starting Pollard wherever you got him. And I'm definitely going to take the pick'em higher than 60.5 yards on the ground, an underdog. I definitely think he can hit that. So I'm going higher than 60. And look, if you're new and you just signed up and you got that new customer special I talked about earlier with Bryce Young just getting 1 yard, right there, you pair those up, easy way to triple your money. Then we got the Commanders at the Seahawks. Start with Brian Robinson. I feel like he's continually good but not great.
Exactly. He feels very touchdown dependent. Not as touchdown dependent as somebody like, say, a Kareem Hunt type of guy. Needs a touchdown to have any real upside, and it's not a good matchup against Seattle. So I'm only going to put him in that start him if you need him category.
Yeah, exactly. This comes down to who else you got in your running back room. You might need him. He's okay, kind of as a borderline RB2, but only if you don't have a better option. And now the Seattle backfield is not as clear as it was. Kenneth Walker, not only not a must start anymore, but is he a guy you consider benching based on the way he's been used lately?
I don't think I'm ready to go that far yet. This isn't a terrible matchup for him. Maybe he can come through with a big run. He's always got touchdown upside because if they do get near the goal line, he'll get the ball. So certainly not a strong start this week, but still startable.
I mean, under 10 carries the last 2 games, Charbonnet getting more involved. That's got to worry you, but I'm going to still be optimistic here because I believe not only the talent, but also this matchup back at home against the Commanders. This is a team that just lost. Well, they traded away their 2 best defensive linemen. You just saw Ramondre Stevenson rip off big runs against them. I'm not worried about Kenneth Walker's last week performance because that game just got way out of hand. He got scripted out of it. I think he bounces back. I am going to consider him a strong start this week. But then there's Zach Charbonnet, who keeps coming on. Do you feel like he gets more touches, more involved this week? It's got to be a good matchup for him, too.
Yeah, but I can't go that far. Like you said, they've had 2 blowout games. I think this game should be a lot closer. Not starting Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I'm feeling better about Walker, that means I'm not thinking Charbonnet will be as involved. I mean, this is a deep streamer if you need. Jets at Raiders. Let's talk Brees Hall. Been pretty good lately. This matchup almost begs you to start him.
Yeah, in this matchup against the Raiders, I mean, they've just been getting destroyed by running backs this year. You pretty much have to start Brees Hall this week.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to keep Brees on my bench. Too much upside. Look, I know him, and that whole offense is inconsistent. It's all about upside. Chase the big game. He could clearly have a big run against this defense, so I'm starting Brees Hall wherever I have him. And then what about Josh Jacobs? You think he's creeping back to no doubt start territory?
Yeah, he might be. He looked great. I mean, I know it was the Giants, but he was running well. Coach seems to want to get him the ball. It's not a great spot this week against the Jets, but I still think you have to start him.
Yeah, I mean, Jets are a tough defense, but again, we know much tougher against the pass and the run. So much volume, so many touches. He looked a little sharper. I mean, he's not ripping off long runs, but if you got Jacobs, again, you pretty much need to start him. And Monday night, we have the Broncos taking on the Buffalo Bills. All right, let's talk Javonte Williams. How do you think he will fare in Buffalo?
I think he'll fare pretty well. This Buffalo run defense has not been good since the loss of Matt Milano. He's getting the touches. I mean, no, he doesn't look super explosive, and he doesn't look all the way back from that knee, but he looks back enough. I think this week he's a solid start.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. I'm still there now on Javonte. He's startable, which is progress for me. But look, Buffalo's giving up 4.6 yards per carry to running backs. Javonte doesn't get, workhorse volume, but I think it's enough that you can consider him a starter. And then there's Jaleel McLaughlin. Not a lot of carries, but he's involved as a receiver, some scoring upside. What do you think?
Yeah, you'd have to be desperate here, even in a good matchup. Desperation flex only.
Well, I'll say what I usually say with McLaughlin in a PPR league. I think he is a streaming candidate because he catches passes. He has touchdown upside. Look, if they're playing from behind against Buffalo, which is possible, he's interesting, but just know there's limited upside. And then we got James Cook. I mean, what do we even do at this point?
I mean, this is such a good matchup, but you can't feel good about James Cook. I mean, in this running game, just because the matchup is good, I'll put him in the start him if you need him category, but sadly, that's as high as I can go.
Well, I will say this. The last 4 weeks, Denver's defense has definitely stiffened up. I mean, obviously, it couldn't have gotten worse when they were the worst run defense in the league, but they've definitely shown improvement. James Cook, I'm going to say just a risky streamer. And then maybe, just maybe, this is the week we see Leonard Fournette in a Bills uniform. If so, are you intrigued?
Hard pass on Leonard Fournette.
All right. Well, I mean, I am too. I was just had to ask. All right, now you know how we feel about all the running backs you need to know about for Week 10. Don't forget, we got you covered for wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, and everything else you need to win. It's all in our playlist right here.